Hello viewers, welcome to Addis Media Network English program. In today's program, I met Professor Lawrence Freeman from United States of America to raise a lot of issues specifically about HR600, the American draft bill, which will be presented to the Senate in the near future. He's going to give us a detailed analysis regarding HR600 and Ethiopia's and the United States of America's diplomatic relationships and other issues. First of all, thank you, Professor. Thank you for your time.
You're welcome.
All right. Okay. Let me start from the first question, Professor. Can you please tell us the historical diplomatic relations between Ethiopia and the United States of America? Can you please compare with the present time?
Well, you have to realize that the United States, like most Western governments, is not homogeneous. There are many different political factions operating in the same government. And there is what I would call an oligarchical faction, geopolitical establishment that wants to control the political economies throughout the world. And therefore, when they look at Russia and they look at China, they see competitors who are trying to challenge their rule. And when they look at Africa, they look at African countries and leaders who will submit and obey their policy. Now, in reality, the United States and Ethiopia should have a very close working relationship and have had that in the past at various times, because the development of Ethiopia and the economic improvement of the lives of Ethiopians is in the interest of the United States. And when we had better presidents, like Franklin Delano Roosevelt and John F. Kennedy, they understood this. Our last round of presidents do not understand this. And right now, in the administration of Joe Biden, we have a grouping of people in his cabinet and in the State Department who are trying to impose their geopolitical dictates on the Horn of Africa, and in particular on Ethiopia. And that's the cause of the conflict. They don't want independent sovereign nations. They don't want independent leaders. They want leaders who will do what they say. And you see this very clearly in the recent comments that have come out of the Senate over the last few days. My view is that if you look at from a geopolitical strategic understanding, the key in the Horn of Africa is the waterway from the Indian Ocean to the Gulf of Eden, to the Red Sea, to the Suez Canal. This is one of the most important water routes on the planet. And the United States political establishment, the geopolitical oligarchy, they want this under their control. And when the Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed Ali came to power, they realized that he is an independent thinker who wants a sovereign Sudan. And in fact, went immediately to discuss policies with Eritrea and Somalia. And they are afraid that there will be an independent, that is independent from the geopolitics of the US, an independent policy for the Horn of Africa. And they obviously had a comfortable working relationship with the Tigrayan People's Liberation Front, the TPLF, for many years. And they are now uncomfortable because they realize that the prime minister is not under their control. And this is what is generating their hostile, disruptive destabilization policies towards Ethiopia.
Yeah, so let me bring about the current issue, which is HR 6600. Which directly affects the sovereignty of Ethiopia. At the same time, the draft bill says like this law is designed to stabilize peace, security, and democracy in Ethiopia, following the conflict in the northern region of the country. Just give us a glimpse about or a clue regarding this draft bill. Then, do you think this sanction will be imposed against Ethiopia?
There are two resolutions that are in the U.S. Congress. One is House Resolution 6600, which is passed the House Foreign Affairs Committee, chaired by the Democratic Party leader, Chairman Meeks. There's another bill in the Senate called S3199. Now, this bill just passed the Senate Foreign Relations Committee on Tuesday. And it's both bills are very similar, not identical, but they're both similar and very dangerous, because what they insist upon is that the US government, the US State Department, President Biden, and the United States AID will be monitoring the progress they believe should be taken in Ethiopia. They want to send in investigation teams to see, quote, what is the status of human rights violations in Tigray? What is their ethnic cleansing? What is their genocide? And if they find us, according to their findings, then they will be recommending to the State Department and to the United States President more sanctions. Now, don't forget, this president, the so-called, some people think a friend of Ethiopia, has imposed sanctions on the Horn of Africa and has removed Ethiopia from the AGOA tariff agreements, therefore throwing hundreds of thousands of more Ethiopians into poverty. And they will issue more sanctions. They will deny money from the IMF, World Bank. They will deny aid. They will deny development funds. They will take global harsh measures, not as harsh as they're taking against Russia today, but they will take harsh measures that will hurt the Ethiopians. And essentially, both the House and the Senate resolutions are designed to essentially remove Ethiopia's sovereignty from its own people and from its own elected government, Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed. They want to be calling the shots from the United States, Congress, and the president. They want to dictate policy. And therefore, Ethiopia is beginning the process of losing its sovereignty under these policies that the United States government is planning. Now, some people think that there is a difference between the United States president and State Department and the US Congress on this policy. I don't think that. And if you look at the comments of Senator Coons, the senator from Delaware, where Biden was a senator, after the passage of 3199 in the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, he was explicit. He said, I passed this bill, but I will make sure that it doesn't go anywhere if Ethiopia carries out the policies we want. And if it doesn't, we will bring back and enforce this bill. So this bill is sitting there, waiting to be used against Ethiopia if they don't do what we want. Now, Senator Coons is the closest Senate ally to President Biden, a close friend, and his envoy to Ethiopia last year. In my mind, I see that there's no way that Senator Coons is not implementing this policy of threatening Ethiopia without the knowledge of President Biden and the State Department.
Before the conflict started, the Ethiopian government, as well the people of Ethiopia, is paying lots of sacrifices for peace. Since the war is waged by TPLF terrorist group, the Ethiopian government still traveled a lot of journey for peace process. For instance, we can raise like the unilateral ceasefire declaration declared by the Ethiopian government. Even recently, the Ethiopian government announced that like indefinite humanitarian truce as effective as immediately, which is welcomed by America's government as well, various regions. So do you think this activities is not considered by Biden's administration not to impose the sanction against Ethiopia? Why don't they consider these kinds of activities or measures taken by the government of Ethiopia?
Well, of course, now you've raised the most important contradiction. Here you have the Ethiopian government declaring a truce, a ceasefire, and this should be recognized as a very positive development to end the suffering and hardships of the Ethiopian people. Yet, at exactly that moment, the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, headed by Senator Menendez from New Jersey, with the support of the Democrats and the Republicans on the committee, that's bipartisan, at that time, when peace is possible, when progress is possible, these senators, these foolish senators, go ahead and pass out of their committee a resolution that will go after the very existence of the sovereignty of the nation state of Ethiopia. That should tell us something. We should learn from that. We should learn the fact that this means that this geopolitical faction in the United States government is not going to let up. Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed is still a target. Ethiopia's sovereignty is still a target. This is not going to go away, including the media attacks, which continue all over the world, and I don't see the Ethiopian government responding to them. But there is going to be no let-up against Ethiopia and no let-up against Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed. And I think the actions by the Senate on Tuesday and the comments from Senator Coons, I think make very clear that the Ethiopians have to recognize this, the government has to understand this, and has to chart a policy for the preservation of the Ethiopian nation state, because the geopolitical factions in the West are not going to let up.
So who is going to be a victim if this draft bill is approved? Is that high government officials or the citizen at large?
Well, of course, we all know that sanctions hurt the people. Look at what Biden did. He did what no other president has done in the last 20, 30 years. He used an economic trade agreement, AGOA, which allows Ethiopians to sell certain products, mainly apparel, without duty cost into the United States. And he used a trade agreement as a weapon. He said, you're now out of AGOA. We kick you out. You're gone. And that means 200,000 and more workers in Ethiopia have lost their jobs, minimal paying jobs. Therefore, the United States administration has increased poverty in Ethiopia, has increased the suffering in Ethiopia. Sanctions are very, very bad. The fact that the United States government, all we can do as a foreign policy tool is sanctions. In my mind, that's both pathetic and impotent. We are a great country. We have great powers. We should be able to sit down with other leaders around the world and work out solutions to the problem. Recognize real concerns that other countries have. They have real economic concerns. They have real security concerns. And we should be, as a great country, be able to come to solutions that are in the interest of both the United States and the other nations in the world. But no, what we do is sanctions. And that is doing nothing but harming the people of Ethiopia. And any US senator, and any US congressman, and any member of the Biden administration who says they really care about the Ethiopian people and they're doing this to help the Ethiopian people, they are not telling the truth, because they are harming intentionally, willfully, the Ethiopian people and making them suffer. And I don't believe this is going to stop.
What kind of recommendations you're going to give us for the Ethiopian government or for diasporas living abroad as well here in Ethiopia, or for lobbyist groups and activists? What is expected from all these segments of community so as to force the US government not to sign the sanction or not to impose the sanction against Ethiopia? What shall we do?
I would compliment the Ethiopian diaspora groups in the United States that I'm in touch with, the major groups, They have been working very hard, very diligently to target the Senate, to target the House, to stop these legislation. Don't forget, both these pieces of legislation in the House and Senate that have passed the committee, they have to come to the floor of the House for a vote of the entire House of Representatives, as well as they have to come to a vote in the Senate for 100 senators to vote. Those decisions are in the hands of the Democratic House leader, Nancy Pelosi, and the Democratic Party leader, Charles Schumer, in the Senate. So the targeting by the Ethiopian community against the leaders of the committees and the House and Senate has been very good. However, my recommendations is, first of all, the government of Ethiopia, I don't know who their lobbyists are or who's giving them information, but they're not getting good intelligence. The government of Ethiopia has to understand that the policy is aimed against the sovereignty of the nation and will not stop unless the Ethiopian government under the Prime Minister and Ahmed Ali give up and commit themselves to following the dictates of the West. So the first thing to do is to recognize who your enemy is and what their policy is. And unfortunately, I don't think they do. Number two is Ethiopia has to look at its foreign relations and economic policy differently. If the US is going to impose sanctions, the United States government is not the only country in the world. There are other allies. China is a reliable ally. India is a reliable ally. Turkey can be an ally. Other countries in Asia can be allies. And countries in Africa can ally together. Three, Ethiopia has to chart a national dialogue policy that discusses the actual importance and understanding of the role of the citizen in Ethiopia as one nation. Ethiopia is not a compilation of different ethnic groups in different regions. That's a false setup that was set up by earlier in 1994-95 Constitution. Ethnicity must submit to citizenship with equality for all. Now then the Ethiopian government must chart a national transformation policy for their development economically in the next 5 years and next 10 years and next generation. What do we have to do to build up the economy? What new infrastructure? The Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam is an outstanding example of Ethiopia's understanding of economics, and it should be supported by all countries in the world, including the United States. But we have to continue to go beyond the GERD. We have to have more railroads, more roads. I recently put on my website, LawrenceFreemanandtheworld.com, an article on nuclear energy. We should be having small modular nuclear reactors to build up the energy capabilities of Ethiopia and every African country. There's many things we can do, but if the people in the government and the people in the diaspora still think that they can work out an arrangement with Biden and the State Department, I think that failure to, the failure to understand they cannot and will not allow, they will not allow, the United States government will not allow Ethiopia to be independent and sovereign. I think the failure to understand that is a big problem and should be corrected. And I'm available to help them, but I don't see them interested in understanding this geopolitical strategy of the West.
Do you think or do you expect President Joe Biden will sign on the draft bill?
I think that Joe Biden, the decision will be not whether Joe Biden signs this legislation. The decision will be whether Joe Biden, as head of the Democratic Party, allows the House, controlled by Democrats, and the Senate, controlled by Democrats, to vote on these bills. If that occurs, then Biden and the State Department are allowing foreign policy against Ethiopia to be determined by these bills, and they're throwing their support behind them. So the question is preventing these bills from being voted up. And as I say, It's all in the hands of Joe Biden and the Democratic Party. They control the whole process. As far as who the target is, it's clear. It's the Ethiopian government. My view is that there have been attempts to carry out a regime change against Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed early on in the beginning of the conflict. I think because of the work I and others have done, that became too politically costly. But I think they will attempt to weaken the government. And I think they want, that is the geopolitical faction in the United States presidency and Congress, they want the TPLF to have a major role. They don't want to eliminate ethnicity, which I do in government. They want ethnicity around. They want the TPLF to play a role. Maybe it can't run the government the way it has in the past, but if the TPLF can have a significant political seat at the table, and they can remain and fuel and instigate ethnicity in the country, then Ethiopia will always be weakened, will always be vulnerable to manipulation. And I think that's what the government wants, some kind of major role for the TPLF, and therefore the actions by both bills, if you read them carefully, is targeting the current government of Ethiopia. They barely mention other groups. The government is the target. They want to, if they can't get rid of it, they want to weaken it. And they, therefore, to make Ethiopia a soft, manipulable country in the Horn of Africa. That's the policy. That's the intention.
Can you please share us the experience of different countries who have been receiving frequent sanctions from the side of the United States of America, like we can take the North Korea, Eritrea, Iran, even the current Russia. Tell us the experience of these countries. Some of them cope up with the sanction, and the others encounter many challenges. Let us hear from you the experience of these countries.
Well, we know that countries can survive U.S. sanctions. The main conflict that's going on with Russia and Ukraine is because Russia realized that it could no longer submit to the Western dictates of their policy, which was endangering their security. And what Russia has done, and I don't support war, I hate war because it just kills people. And to me, people are sacred. But what Russia was presented with was a problem that if they continue to allow the West security to mobilize against their nation, they were going to be forced further and further into submission. And their actions have now changed the world. The world will never go back to the way it was, because what Russia has done, and China has done in a different way through its economy, is they've upset the geopolitical chessboard. Therefore, the West will no longer dictate international rules, as they call them, international laws, as they call them. Those days are over. So the West has been disrupted. It will not go back to the way it is. We will never live the same ways again in this world. And therefore, that's an opening for many countries who have been sanctioned by the United States to realize that they can survive sanctions. And there's the countries that you named, some of them have survived sanctions. In fact, Eritrea has survived sanctions very well. Sanctions are not the end of the world. They're very harsh, they're wrong, I oppose them. But there's life after sanctions. And Ethiopia has to start thinking that way and understand how they can reorganize their foreign relations and their economy to survive and succeed even under US sanctions and US threats. But the first thing is they have to understand it. They have to recognize it. And this is my concern, is that the government does not understand and recognize the intentions of this geopolitical policy against Ethiopia.
On behalf of both parties, that means from the government of Ethiopia as well from the Biden administration, what's your recommendation so as to boost or strengthen Ethio-American relationship?
Well, at this point, the burden of this relies on the United States, because the history of my country, which I love, has been an understanding of building economies that develop and grow and raise the standard of living for its people. Don't forget, the United States was built on the policies of Alexander Hamilton, the first Secretary of the Treasury under President George Washington. And those policies understood the purpose of increasing infrastructure, increasing the manufacturing sector, modernizing the agricultural sector, and lending money at low interest rates for these enterprises. This is how the United States was built. And these policies should be what we're exporting to the rest of the world. Now let's take the concrete case of Ethiopia. Ethiopia has bold ideas about economics. This is understood if you look at the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam, which will be the biggest dam in Africa. It will produce 6,000 megawatts of power. Now, 6,000 megawatts of power is a lot to Africa and Ethiopia. To me, it's not enough. We need far more electrical power in Ethiopia and every other country. That's why I support small modular nuclear reactors to bring more energy. The United States could start by complementing and supporting the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam, which they have not. After all these years, there is no US support for the GERD. That should tell us something. The United States could be lending money at low interest credit for more infrastructure development in Ethiopia. It's in the United States' interest to have a stable, prosperous Ethiopia, to have a stable, prosperous Horn of Africa. Given what is going on in Sudan, the United States is more than foolish to be destabilizing Ethiopia. Ethiopia should be the rock of the Horn of Africa. And the United States should be putting forth policies that are in the common interest, which revolve around the economic development of the country. You have 110 plus million people, which is growing. If those people don't have jobs, if they don't have food, if they don't have electricity, then that endangers the Horn of Africa, which endangers a peaceful world. So why doesn't the United States help, not give aid, but give credits for industry, credits for manufacturing center, credits to modernize agriculture, credits for more infrastructure? These are the type of things the US should be doing. These are the kind of things that Franklin Roosevelt talked about, that President John F. Kennedy involved himself with in Ghana. And yet the last 50, 60 years of US presidents and US policy has not even understood the ABCs of the American system of economics. And this is what I propose the United States should do.
What kinds of things this draft bill, if it is approved, will prohibit Ethiopia to access? And if so, let me hear from you its impact, not only from the perspective of Ethiopia, rather from the Horn region.
If these pieces of legislation are enacted, it's going to be a political disaster for the Horn of Africa, and therefore for actually the whole continent of Africa and the world, because you will increase poverty. These bills will cut off any lending, any aid. But the most important thing Ethiopia will lose, in addition to economic hardship, which will fuel ethnicity, which will fuel and instigate more conflict. When your country becomes poorer, groups fight and kill each other over limited resources, and ethnic fault lines become even stronger. So if Ethiopia has become poorer as a result of these sanctions, you'll see more, not less, more ethnic conflict. You'll see more poverty. And given the fact that Ethiopia is the most important country in the Horn of Africa, this will destabilize the entire region. It will affect Sudan, Somalia, Kenya, etc. So this is a policy, these bills are a policy to increase destabilization, to increase poverty, to increase conflict. And most importantly, these bills usurp the sovereignty of the Ethiopian nation and the Ethiopian people. It means that the Ethiopian people and the government they elected must submit, must act as a puppet for US policy. And Senator Coons said it very clearly. I voted for this bill so we have it ready if Ethiopia doesn't do what we want. So it should be crystal clear to every Ethiopian, to every African, and to the Ethiopian government what the intention of these bills are.
On behalf of Addis Media Network and myself, Professor Lawrence Freeman, an American political analyst, thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate. I hope we will meet some other time and I will raise another issues. I hope you are an Ethiopian lover. You will keep struggling for Ethiopia, especially in forcing the US government not to impose the draft bill or the sanction. Keep up, we will learn. Thank you very much indeed.
Well, thank you very much for this opportunity to speak to the Ethiopian people. And I look forward to coming to Ethiopia at the earliest opportunity for more discussions. And thank you again.
Thank you very much. Well, viewers, this concludes our today's episode. I have Lawrence Freeman from United States of America. He's a political analyst. We have raised a lot of issues. Specifically, we have raised regarding the HR600 draft bill. It is thematic areas and concept. I think we had a nice time together. I will be back with another guest. I am Ugaye Mulana. Thank you very much indeed. Stay tuned with Addis Media Network. Thank you very much.